Okay, so now that you've gotten the protagonist out of the picture, you need to spend this entire book focusing on the petty rivalry between the two love interests. I want there to be tears, maybe even blood. Please, if you can, put in some ruined manicures.
No, I'm putting my foot down. Stop this nonsense. It was frustrating for one book, but we can still right the ship.
Fine. What do you propose? Not that we're actually going to do it, but I'll listen. So I can mess it up.
So, the protagonist is in mortal peril, right?
Right. I mean, he's literally been turned into a meat puppet for the bad guys and spends his days killing people right now. I'm thinking he won't be freed until the end of the book.
Okay, that's a great start. Now you need to focus on the way this affects the people closest to him. How does his best friend feel after being left alone for the past few months? Is the girl he likes going to do anything to help rescue him, since she has pertinent information that can help?
Ooh, I know. What if she kills him?
What?
Kill? Him. The girl he likes could kill him.
I don't think I like your ideas anymore. Actually, there's something there. It could actually be really dramatic and beautiful. She searches desperately for a way to save him, but ultimately comes to the conclusion that he wouldn't want to live this way. She probably reciprocates his feelings on some level, but only because she understands him well enough that she knows this is the decision he would want her to make. It could be a story about letting go, and about contrasting the love that she has for him with the love of the best friend, who never stops fighting for him even when things look hopeless.
I'm actually gonna step back on this one. You should do that. That was amazing.
Okay, there's something there, but what about the second love interest? Don't let her do anything. Bench her for the entire book. She can stand around in the background, but she can't have any effect on the plot. Don't let her mess this up.
Okay, but only if I get to do something awesome with her in the next book.
Deal.
Hello everybody, it's Jade. This week we're talking about Rogue, the 5th book in the HIVE series, or as I like to call it, Book 2-2. Because we're doing Book 2 all over again, but remixed. About the skits, I recorded a bunch of them at the same time, and I recorded them before I even read Dreadnought, so some of the details I was unsure of and hadn't read in 10 plus years, so if there are any issues in accuracy, I apologize. Now, the thing about Rogue is that I did a little survey before I started this project. I asked everybody which books were their favorite. Book 5 is by far the most popular book. It got the most votes as people's one individual favorite book. There is another book that came in second place that was only 1 vote less, but this one uniquely did not have anyone that actually dislikes it. This is considered to be the best of the HIVE series. It also has the coolest cover because it's got this blue stuff on the edges. Yeah. Anyway, the reason I think that this one is so beloved and is so popular is because Mark Walden seems to thrive when he has like 5 or 6 narrators. You know, I told you that I didn't like certain aspects of Escape Velocity because it had like 12 narrators and nobody's character development was really, really focused on. Whereas the books like 1 and 2 and this one, where we only have a handful of characters that are being examined, tend to ring more emotionally powerfully. That was phrased really horribly. But the point is, you know, in book 3, we had a whole bunch of new villains, and we had a whole bunch of fight scenes with mooks and stuff that ultimately left a lot of the page space dedicated to things that the audience didn't care about as much as seeing the characters we actually like. All of the characters in this book are characters that we actually care about. Otto serves as the antagonist in this book. And so instead of having a new villain like Sebastian Trent or Jason Drake taking up a bunch of narrating time, which Sebastian Trent does narrate a little bit, instead that role is filled by Otto. So the role that's normally filled by Otto is split between Laura and Wing. But Laura already normally narrates a decent amount, so the amount that Laura and Wing have to split as, sharing being the protagonist is actually a lot. They both get a lot of narrative time, a lot of character development in this book, and it's so, so good. We also have Cypher back as an antagonist, and instead of having to spend a bunch of time meeting a new antagonist and Mark Walden trying to convince us that we should care about them, instead we have somebody that we already know, we already care about, we already know his deal, and we just get to see how much he's lost it from being locked in a tiny room for the past 2 years. So, for that reason, this book feels a lot denser with good things. There's almost no fat in this book. There's nothing you can cut because you don't care. We get a couple of these little scenes like there's a scene where Laura and Shelby are in their room and Laura is complaining about how tired she is because she stayed up the previous night programming. And there's a later scene where at the lunch table where the kids are making fun of Laura for being tired from staying up the night before programming, and a couple scenes with Nigel and Franz where Nigel is talking about the fact that he's worried about his dad, all of which are technically not necessary, but I would rather get scenes like this where the kids are talking to each other as unnecessary scenes than scenes where henchmen are sitting around the Hope command centers typing in commands and yelling status reports. This one's super, super good. Yeah. So let's start at the very beginning. So page 1 is actually from the perspective... Okay. Page 1 is from the perspective of Dr. Morley, who is this very, very dead man, who is some kind of bioengineer. He worked on the device that ended up being implanted into Otto's head. Now, he didn't actually design the device. His only job was to clone the man formerly known as Number 1 a bunch of times, repeatedly try to implant one of these devices into one of these clones, and then report back when one of them didn't die. So the thing about Charles Morley is that he's not exactly a morally upstanding dude. He probably had to kill a lot of babies. But when Overlord kills him, you still get the sense that Overlord is not doing a very just and morally upright thing. We see that even though Morley has probably seen a lot of babies die, he does look at baby Otto with some amount of human paternal instinct that Overlord just doesn't have. Speaking of Overlord, Overlord walks in, a tall man with white hair, which, hilariously, this means that Otto will probably be tall if he ever gets to grow up. So even though he's sad about how short he is now, he just has to wait. Not that he has the opportunity to know that. So Overlord walks in and checks in on the status of all of the fetuses, and Dr. Morley tells him, all right, we finally found one, number 0110, who actually was able to survive when we put the implant in his head. So this means that there's either been 110 kids, at least up to this point, or 5, if this isn't binary. But, that is a non-zero amount of dead children. So the client, Overlord, sees the number 0110, and there's a bunch of moisture over the plaque with the number on it. And he puts a little line over the entire 4-digit sequence, and it spells Otto. But before this, we get some actual narration from Overlord about what he thinks. And the thing is, we were all kind of wrong about his motivation. When he first came into existence in the flashback in book 2, it seemed like he wanted to rule over the humans. He said, this world is my birthright, but it turns out that's not actually it. He considers himself to be overlord of the machines. So he wants to have dominion over the digital scape, over all electronics, and he considers himself, he considers it his responsibility as the lord of the electronics to make the machines a more powerful nation, basically. He wants to develop new technology that will allow there to be more machines. He wants to kill all humans so that the machines take over the world. But he doesn't consider himself to be ruler over the humans. He considers steamrolling the humans to be part of, you have to kill all the grass if you want to put a building on top of the grass. Yeah, real pleasant dude. So after that, we get the single most horrifying sentence in the entire series. 13 years later. Now, what do you mean 13 years later? Are we talking, book 1? I thought Otto is, if this is 6 months after book 4, which I think it is, that would make Otto 16 years old. And that's something that I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, even though this is going to run super long if I have to talk about everything. HIVE is a book for children. And the thing about books for children, whether YA or middle grade or early reader or whatever, is that if you try to market to a specific age group, you have to stay within that age group. There was another book series in the same genre that was coming out around the same time called Maximum Ride, that they passed Christmas several times. You could count the number of years that went by, and it was 4. And Max turned 15 in the middle of the series, and she was 15 at the end of the series. Because publishers want to be able to say, this is a book for 13-year-olds, therefore Otto is going to be 13. No matter how many years have passed in story, no matter the fact that the kids act differently, the fact that Wing is the size of an adult now when previously he was not the size of an adult. The kids, like I said last book, behave differently now that they are getting older and, going through puberty. But the publisher is going to keep telling Mark Walden, no, your children, your fictional children, are 13. So I want you to just, when you see this, imagine that Mark Walden had a gun to his head when he had to type that sentence. Because the kids will behave the way the math says they behave. So now the children are 16. They're really, really teenagers and not really children anymore. It's not a retcon. It's not Mark Walden can't do math. It's Bloomsbury telling Mark Walden what to do. So now we skip over to Madame Mortis. Madame Mortis, if you remember from book 2, is the head of French glove operations. We don't really know what she does, but she was the woman who was suggesting that they build robotic sharks to take out their enemies as they're at the beach. And number 1 told her she was an idiot. That lady. However, even though she had bad ideas, it doesn't mean that she deserves to die. In this scene, we see a woman in white systematically cut down a bunch of Madame Mortis's henchmen, and then Madame Mortis flees back up to the top floor of her building to try to hide out until glove forces can come rescue her, but someone is waiting for her. A young man with white hair. It's our boy Otto, except he looks really sickly. He's got black eyes and black tendrils all over his face, and he pushes her back into the elevator, or rather she retreats back into the elevator, and he drops them like 100 stories and they die. We also know that he killed somebody else right before this, who was also a member of the Glove Council. So I thought long and hard about whether to count these as kills for Otto on my kill count list. And ultimately, I've decided I am going to count these as kills. I know that it's not Otto actually making the decision, but at the end of the day, I want this kill count to be counting everybody that can possibly be counted for each person on the list. So Otto kills the other dude on the Glove Council, Madame Mortis, and one of her guards. So that puts him in position number 2 right now with 3 kills. We'll see where this goes from here. However, this isn't really Otto. This is Otto under the influence of Animus, the black liquid that we first saw in Interception Point that is some kind of organic supercomputer. Effectively, this stuff is programmable, and then it is able to interface with a person's brain and access their neurofunctions or whatever. The personality of the Animus kid is basically non-existent, but it doesn't appear to be that, Mark Walden didn't write this character. It's that we find out later that Otto retreated into his implant, like his consciousness retreated into his implant. So the only thing left in his brain is the actual information that he knows. There's certain types of amnesia where you remember how to do your job, or you remember everything you learned in school, but you don't remember where your office supplies are, or you don't remember your teachers. You know how to read, but you don't remember learning how to read. That appears to be what the Animus kid is. He knows all of the things that Otto knows about computers and actually reading and how to speak, but he doesn't remember, the Hive or any of his friends, except when the actual Otto is pushing information into his head. So the Animus kid appears to have some actual personality traits, just only a couple months worth of them. He appears to want to be helpful to Sebastian Trent and Ghost, and he's also really annoyed by the constant headaches that he has whenever Otto tries to interfere with what he's doing. But he just hasn't been alive long enough to actually have a personality or his own name. Everybody calls him Otto, even though he's not. He's also super, super obedient and loyal to Trent. He's kind of a people pleaser. He is constantly looking for ways to be more helpful. It's very clearly not Otto, but he's also not just a robot. Yeah. So then we get to the council leadership subplot. So Diabolus calls a meeting for the entire Glove Council, and they all have to meet in person. And we see that Diabolus is really kind of struggling to lead Glove. He may be everybody's favorite barbecue dad, but that doesn't make him an appropriate leader for a global league of villainous enterprises. Basically, he sits everybody down and tells them Madame Mortis and the other guy whose name I don't remember have been killed, and he was killed by Otto. All 3 of them were killed by Otto. And I haven't issued a capture or kill order on him yet because I know this kid and he wouldn't, betray us, but also something weird is going on, something to do with Hope. And what happens here is all of the other Glove members start pressuring him into letting them go after Otto and try to kill him. They see Diabolus as a weak man, and therefore they push back against his leadership really, really strongly. And what happens after this is Diabolus tells Nero, all right, well, everybody sees me as a weak leader, so I issued a capture or kill order on Otto because I don't want them to see me as weak. When in actuality, what this does is it shows us, the audience, that Diabolus is a weak leader. He caved to the pressure of what everybody else was telling him to do instead of using his own judgment. So what happens after this is, as soon as Diabolus tells him that he's issued this capture or kill order, Nero is immediately like, you can't do this. That's one of my students. You're basically declaring war against the Hive. I'm going to leave Glove if you go through with this. Which is a massive turnaround. The thing about Diabolus and Nero is they're besties. They're homies. Nero wears a black suit with a red cravat, and Diabolus wears a red suit with a black undershirt. So they are literally palette swaps of each other. Nero is Diabolus's right-hand man. Diabolus spent an entire book trying to rescue Nero. They are like this, but then the moment Diabolus poses a threat to one of the kids, Nero is just like, screw you. All our years of friendship, gone. But fortunately for Diabolus here, he's shot and barely makes it out. And he spends the rest of the book recovering from surgery at the Hive. There's an attempt on his life. He barely doesn't get killed. And he's in a medically induced coma until the last 20 pages. But the thing is here that back in book 3, we had this whole, you don't have to be loved to be a leader, you just have to be feared thing. That Otto thought to himself can't possibly be true. It's okay to be a leader who rules with love, which seemed to be supported by Diabolus's leadership of Megalodon. But now that we see how Diabolus is leading Glove, we see that doesn't always work. Diabolus is an extremely kind and empathetic man, and it just doesn't work in every situation. During this whole thing, Raven gets a laptop from Nazim Khan, who, tinfoil hat time, must be Tahir Khan's father from back in book 1. And this laptop later allows them to figure out where the Hope base is, because it has some files on it that in the corner of the scan has a seed of a plant that only grows in the Amazon. And also there's a bit of C4 used in the laptop that is later used by Pike to get out of a sticky situation. Anyway, moving on. So now let's talk about the kids. I want to bring up that the major theme for the children, I keep calling them children, but they're not anymore. The major theme for the teenagers, the major theme for the alphas in this book is obedience. Specifically, the main 3 kids who actually get focus here, Otto, Laura, and Wing. But they all kind of have shades of this. The first person we spend a lot of time with is Laura, who has, at this point, pretty much fully integrated into the Hive. We see that she's apparently pulled a couple of pranks in the time that Otto's been missing, and she actually got in trouble for them, but they're all Hive appropriate pranks. They're not actual acts of rebellion. They're the kinds of things that Nero kind of wants the kids to be doing, And then apparently Nero told her before the start of the story that he doesn't want her accessing the school computer system anymore. And she has actually been listening. Because of this, later on in the story, when Nero tells her, hey, I need you to be emotionally prepared because we might actually have to kill Otto, she accepts this. She trusts Nero. She's become part of the Hive. She spends a huge amount of her time trying to help the Hive, spending time in the computer system. She figures out what's going on with what's wrong with the school computer system that's causing these power outages. When the power goes out, she understands that this means that the volcano might erupt, and she takes it upon herself to try to solve the problem because she sees herself as someone who has some amount of responsibility to the Hive at this point. Wing, on the other hand, is exactly the opposite. I'm pretty sure he doesn't follow a single order in this entire book. He leaves the Hive in the middle of the book to go run off with Raven against her wishes. She repeatedly asks him to do things that he just says, no, I'm not doing that, no, over and over and over again. Then later his dad comes back into the picture and his dad tells him to do a bunch of different things and he just says, no, I'm not going to do that, no, I'm not going to do that. And the thing is, I want to know what Wing is planning to do with his life. Like, Wing, I don't really see him becoming like a member of the Glove Whittling Council. His dad is trying to take him away from the Hive because he doesn't want him to be part of Glove when he grows up. And Wing says, well, that's my decision to make. But he really doesn't appear to identify as a Hive student in the same way that Laura does. Wing is there because of the people, because of the other students that he's close to, like Otto and Shelby, and that appears to be basically it. But he doesn't appear to have any interest in actually joining Glove or fighting for Glove. He doesn't trust Nero. He tells Raven here that he doesn't trust her, even though he does care about her, and she's another person that I suppose he's staying at the Hive for. But I don't get the sense that he's just going to, like, become a Glove operative when he graduates. Because he's very, very independent. If somebody tells him to do something, he can't do it. But he also isn't very much of a leader. Like, he's a lone wolf. Yeah. I'm going to pay attention to Wing going forward because I never really thought about this, but I don't know what his future holds. By the way, I received Bloodline in the mail and I decided I'm going to wait to read it until the final week after I've reread the rest of the books. So no, I don't know the ending. I don't know what happens to Wing. I don't know what happens to anybody. The Animus kid in Otto's body is extremely, extremely obedient. Later, when Otto is back at the Hive, he does actually trust Nero with the knowledge of what happened to him while he was away. Cypher tells Lucy to shut up a bunch of times. She tries to rebel against him, but he completely has control over her. Also, Lucy being able to control other people and make them obedient is thematic to this whole obedience thing we've got going. So the first plot we actually have is Laura's plot, which has to do with the fact that the school is having these massive power glitches that are causing random things to occur between the lights going out, the AC going out, the shower being a random temperature when you turn it on in the morning, and random bits of music playing throughout the day at maximum volume. However, these things are getting more and more frequent, and everybody's starting to get concerned that something bad could happen that could actually harm somebody. So Pike asks her to come and help him. So I want to talk about something that I brought up before, but I feel like could use a little bit of reiterating. So there's this spectrum of like computer disciplines. On the one side of the spectrum, you have actual physics, like things that concretely exist that you can touch or see. But that also includes things like photonics. So on the one side, you have physics, and then getting more theoretical, you have photonics. So that's the study of like lasers and light moving and stuff like that. Then you've got electrical engineering. Electrical engineering is you're making power lines, you're making devices, you're making power supplies for computers. Then you've got computer engineering, which is where you apply electrical engineering to computers. You know, how am I going to make this circuit board that goes in a computer? Now, in practice, that is usually done by someone who is trained as an electrical engineer. But anyway, then from there, now you're at computers. So you start to get into things that are more computer programming type. So you might have low-level computer programming where you're programming things that actually interface with the hardware. Then you get higher-level computer programming that is actual software people run on their computers, like Photoshop or Zoom. And then as you get more and more theoretical, the opposite end of the spectrum from physics is pure math. You know, math you cannot touch, you cannot see. It's entirely imaginary. It's fake, but we all agree to pretend that math exists, even though it does, because we all agree to pretend that it does. So on the one hand, over here, physics is only things you can touch, and on the other hand is math, only things you can't. So right next to it was optics and electrical engineering. Remember how Pike only really wants to build lasers? He always talks about the lasers or the guns that he's making. Pike sits somewhere between electrical engineering and photonic engineering. Then we've got Otto, who likes building devices, but he's mostly like assembling pre-made devices and then doing some amount of programming on them. We've seen a couple of robots that he's made. He hasn't made them super, super intelligent, but you know, for the most part, they're teleoperated, they're remote controlled. But he does do some programming. So he's like halfway between an electrical engineer and like a programmer. Then we've got Laura, who is into computer networking and hacking and stuff. So she does some programming, and she does some stuff that's about how computers talk to each other. And then all the way on this side is Cypher. Cypher is an AI engineer. He only does computer programming. He doesn't really build anything. Even though he does build something here, it's a hack job. He is an AI expert. He does a lot of math. He's not really building things that interface with people. He's making really, really complicated mathematical models. So at one point in this book, Pike mentions that Laura is probably the best systems analyst on the island behind him. And then it turns out in Laura's narration that she has actually been secretly doing maintenance on the system for the past several months because Pike has missed a lot of issues, thus establishing to us that Laura is actually the best systems analyst on the island, not Pike. And a couple of people were bothered by this because why is Laura, a 16-year-old, the best systems analyst at the Hive? And the answer that I have for that is a theory. I think that the majority of alphas, like the vast majority of alphas, are like Franz. They're there because their parents are there. They're there because their parents used to go to the Hive or wanted them to go to the Hive. And they're studying economics. All of the people that we've heard about who used to go to the Hive are not programmers or or engineers like Otto and Laura. In fact, in book 1, it is explicitly stated that Otto and Laura are the only alphas with a technical focus in their year. So it's not too much of a stretch to assume that the other years probably don't have very many, if any, technical focused alphas. So at maximum, Laura is competing with 5 other potentially technical focused alphas. So she just has to be better than those other 5 people. And Pike isn't a programmer. It says here that he actually created hive mind by copying other people's code, and he doesn't really understand the AI stuff. That's why he has to ask Cypher for help. So it's not that much of a stretch at all to assume that Laura, who is a 4th year Hive student at this point, is a better programmer than he is, when programming isn't what he actually cares about. The man just wants to build lasers. So Pike asks her to help solve the power problems, and so she sits down at a terminal, and she starts thinking about hive mind. Now, remember back in book 2 when I said Laura isn't psychic, but throughout the series, she starts thinking about things that indicate to us that she's figured out what's going on before she consciously realizes that she's figured out what's going on. Yeah, that's what happened here. She has all the information that she needs to know that the thing messing with the school computer system is hive mind. She just isn't conscious of it yet. So she's sitting in the data room thinking about hive mind. She checks the network storage, which is something that she would check if she wanted to know if it was hive mind, and she sees that her theory is correct. So she shows this to Pike. She says, look, the network storage is growing, or the amount of data in network storage is growing, so the amount of available space is shrinking. And the thing about this isn't the first thing that Pike should have checked, but this is like the 10th thing that Pike should have checked. Pike doesn't really know what he's doing, and he doesn't really know how to solve this problem. And Laura found a massive clue as to what's going on within the first 5 minutes of sitting down and looking at the system. So a reasonable person would go, I'm not fully equipped to do this. I'm going to continue to use this person's help. However, Pike is like insecure about the fact that some of the students are smarter than him. So he says, I was just about to check that. Thank you, please leave. And she goes, I can help. And he goes, oh, no. I don't want your help. Please leave. He also doesn't give her a hall pass, and so she ends up getting detention for helping Pike solve the power problem, which is a danger to everyone, which indicates to me that Pike actually didn't tell Nero that he was asking for her help. He doesn't want Nero to know that he needed her help. Later, he dismisses her help again when she figures out that an AI is growing in the school system. This isn't the first time that he's displayed insecurity about his own intelligence either. If you remember back in book 2, he was being a jerk to Otto just for suggesting something. Yeah, it's kind of a terrible quality in an adult. Pike, please. So Pike sends her on her way. She goes back to class, and she's cornered by Block and Tackle. They start just generally treating her like shit because they realize that she's a person alone in an empty hallway, and she's significantly smaller than them, and she has some obvious emotional buttons that can be pressed at the moment. And this is the point where you're supposed to start to realize that Laura isn't doing well, like emotionally. She, hive mind died. Otto is missing and probably dead. Pike, the only other person on the island, other than Cypher, whom she doesn't know about, who could actually talk to her about technical stuff, just told her he doesn't want her help and to please go away. So she's entirely alone. We also saw earlier in the book that Shelby was just not being a very good friend about the whole Otto is missing situation. She brings it up and then goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I brought that up." So she's about as supportive as a styrofoam cup. So when Block and Tackle corner her here, she lashes out. Like, she starts yelling at them. Her accent gets like 6 times worse and starts like, her words start getting spelled out in phonetic Scottish. When someone comes to her aid, and it is Lucy Dexter. Lucy mind controls the 2 boys into standing in the middle of the hallway hugging. And we get some information here. One, Lucy can mind control somebody more the greater the disparity between their intelligences. So she's much smarter than Block and Tackle, so her mind control is more effective. Later on, she tries to mind control Cypher, who is smarter than her, and it just doesn't work. No idea what would happen if she tried to mind control Laura. I hope we see that. Anyway, so the point of the scene is that even though Laura is entirely alone when it comes to, fellow nerds to talk to, she isn't entirely alone, in general. There are new friends that she could make. If Otto doesn't make it back, she will be okay. She's doing badly. She's not happy. She's not thrilled. But she's not drowning either. And that was something that I liked about this book. Even though Otto is missing and everybody's kind of bummed, none of the other kids are, incapable of functioning without him. They're just kind of moving on with their lives while being sad. And I think that's kind of realistic. I've read some other bad books where a member of the cast goes missing, particularly the protagonist, and everybody else just can't go on without them. I think this approach gives dignity to the characters and is overall better and more compelling. Laura and Wing have lives outside of Otto, even though they are happier when he is around and definitely alive. Laura spends the next couple of days helping Pike against his will with the power problem. She figures out that that what's taking up all this space is an AI that's growing in the system. She runs and tells Pike in the middle of the night, and he's asleep, showing that Pike is sleeping on this problem, whereas Laura has actually been trying to solve it. Pike, oh my god. And then Pike sends her away. At first I was thinking this was another instance of him not wanting a kid to be better at his job than he is, but I realized later I think it's because he knew that Laura would try to prevent them from putting down whatever AI they're about to kill. Sort of like how you send the kid out of the room before you put down a wild animal that got into the house. A significant character growth that Laura has had over the course of the series that becomes really, really obvious here is that she has taken several levels in being good with people. In book 1, she was very friendly and outgoing and willing to talk to people. And in book 2, she was betrayed by the Contessa, who was her favorite teacher, who ended up kidnapping her and destroying half of her stuff. So that has evolved into Laura being a person who can actually analyze people's motives and generally understand people better. She properly calls that Hive Mind is pretending to be Overlord later, and she then picks up on Nero's plan as to what he's going to do with Otto. It's a bit of character development that has happened in the background, but is really obvious when we actually have a book where we spend a lot of time with her. So what happens is, we'll talk more about Cypher later, but Nero and Pike go downstairs to get Cypher out of prison, who he has been sitting in a room with a single bookshelf of books for the past 2 years. And he says, please get me out of here. I've read these books so many times. Or you could just kill me. They show him some of this code and he goes, this is Overlord code. So at this point in the book, you're supposed to be thinking that the passenger in Otto's head is hive mind. In fact, you're supposed to be thinking that the person we later find out is Otto inside Otto's head is hive mind. And that Otto is just amnesiac. Is an amnesiac. And you're supposed to be thinking that the person inside the school system is Overlord. But actually that would have been better because they have enough AI experts. Okay, they have Cypher and a couple other people on the island who could shut down Overlord. And if Hive Mind had been able to take over Otto's body, that would have been okay. But the fact that Hive Mind is actually in the school system and Overlord is in Otto's body is worse, like way worse. So Cypher realizes that Overlord is in the school system. They run back upstairs after having to blow a hole in the wall and meet Laura and the other 2 girls in Hive Mind's main data center, where some AI that they think is Overlord is starting to boot up. And they think, well, we have to shut this down no matter what, because otherwise we're just all going to die. Overlord is just going to kill all of us. And they have to shut down a couple of systems to be able to actually shut down this AI. So at one point, Nero decides he's going to shut down the medical bay, which would mean killing Diabolus, which is an instance of Nero making this like trolley problem decision that he needs to protect everybody else, even at the expense of somebody. Something that he does in front of Laura, and that obviously causes him great pain, because Diabolus is his best friend, but he decides to do it. Then after this, Hive Mind disguised as Overlord says, okay, stop. You have to let me finish my installation in the system, or I'm going to kill everybody in Accommodation Block 7. And Nero is like, well, you're going to kill all of us, so yeah, I know there's a couple hundred kids in Accommodation Block 7, but I'm willing to kill them to make sure the rest of us get out of here. Do it. And that's when Laura goes, hang on, Overlord would just kill all of us. This has to be Hive Mind. Which actually causes Nero to stop and go, wait, actually you're right. So Hive Mind boots up, and they have a long conversation with all of the main characters where they're like, all right, what do we know so far? Hive Mind tells them that Overlord is in Otto's head, and Laura's like, oh yeah, that's right. Otto did tell me he was feeling a little possessed about 6 months ago. And everybody goes, thank you for waiting until now to distribute that very important information. And Hive Mind basically tells them that, like, when Otto deleted both him and Overlord at the end of book 3, Overlord was able to survive as a seed program, and that involved having to save Hive Mind as well. So Hive Mind just became sentient again, but Overlord is going to become sentient again, like, probably around this time. Like, probably right now. Right now we're having this problem. And the girls have to stand there and go, well, crap. And we don't know what Shelby and Lucy are thinking of this because we're in Laura's head. But Laura thinks about, well, I know that Overlord is bad. And she turns to Nero and says, I know you're probably planning on killing Otto, but you can't. Please don't. And Nero says, look, I understand where you're coming from. I know that this isn't actually Otto's fault and this is outside of his control, but Otto has apparently been killing a bunch of world leaders. This is something that we're going to have to do. And Laura actually accepts this. Like, Laura goes, all right, that sucks, but I suppose that that's the reality of the situation. Partially because at this point, she trusts Nero. She just saw Nero potentially have to sacrifice Diabolus to prevent Overlord from rebooting. She knows how serious the situation is, and on top of that, she's had 6 months to grieve for Otto. She hasn't really been sure that he's alive up until this point. And she's mature enough to understand that this is the situation we're in. So that's where we're going to leave Laura for now, because we got to hop over to Wing to contrast everything that just happened. But first, we got to spend just a little bit of time talking about Lucy. So Lucy doesn't really do very much in this one, but she does get a personality. Good for her. So in the last book, Lucy was like, oh, I don't want to use my mind control powers. Mind control is bad. And I'm really hoping that I can learn how to protect myself while I'm here so that I never have to use my mind control again. In this one, she's basically mind control go burr. Every opportunity that she has to mind control somebody, she takes. She vetoes one of Laura's ideas later and says, actually, we can solve this problem with mind control. But I think that it's because she's gaining confidence also in her own abilities to actually judge a situation. She didn't want to become her evil grandmother, but she is realizing that, she can make her own judgments. She wants to have control over herself so that she doesn't become the Contessa who was constantly controlled by everyone else, even though she had mind control. But she understands that if she uses this correctly, there is a possibility that she can actually use it and not have to be in hiding for the rest of her life. However, once the girls are captured by Cypher, she is told that she cannot speak. And every time she opens her mouth, Cypher points a gun at her head and says, if you say a word, I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to blow your brains out. And the thing is that superpowers in this universe suck to have. There have been some other pieces of media that have tried to examine, like, what would it be like if somebody had superpowers, really? And most of them take the route of saying that if somebody has superpowers, they will be able to just clean the floor with everybody they come into contact with. If somebody has superpowers, then everybody else on the planet is at a disadvantage. HIVE actually takes the opposite approach here. HIVE says, well, if there's only 1 or 2 people with powers, then everybody else is going to try to get control of them. Otto in the previous book was captured because somebody wanted to have access to his superpowers. Lucy, once Cypher figures out who she is immediately benched. She's not allowed to speak. She's rendered powerless all over again. And once somebody figures out that there's the last remaining Sinister at the HIVE, I can't imagine that nobody is going to be interested in gaining control over her the same way that they're doing it to Otto. If there were a lot more of them, maybe not. More of them that could protect each other. But right now there's only 2 people that we know of in this entire planet who have superpowers. And they're both kind of sitting ducks because of it. Also, in this book, we kind of established something that I alluded to last week. I didn't really think about when I was first reading this, but of the 3 girls, in this book, Shelby solves little problems and takes down a couple mooks. Lucy solves a couple little problems and takes down some mooks. Laura debilitates major antagonists, keeps important information, and protects the HIVE. It's interesting. Shelby has some real utility here as far as she is able to get people out of situations. She gets a couple of good character moments where she doesn't want to return to the accommodation block during lockdown because she has a real fear of being locked into places, that ends up allowing the girls to go interfere with the whole hive mind overlord situation. But she doesn't really get very much focus at all. Nigel doesn't get very much focus either, but we do see him really worried about his dad in this book. And Franz kind of tries to protect him during this time, watches out for him and tries to distract him from the problems that are currently going on. And there was a scene in here where Franz is insisting that he's going to go back to their room with Nigel. He's going to skip class and he's going to try to keep Nigel company. That convinced me that I think that the kids were paired up for a reason. Like, we sort of suspected it back in book 1, but I think that Nigel and Franz were paired up because their personalities are opposite. Nigel is effectively Eeyore. I don't think I've ever seen him happy since book 1 in this series, and he wasn't even really happy. He was just not suffering for like 2 pages. Franz, on the other hand, is always going at 100 miles an hour. He is obsessed with protecting Nigel. He gets in the way of everybody that's trying to bother Nigel. He's a lot like Otto in that, you know how Otto has his the people in my circle matter and I will steamroll everyone else to protect them. Franz is like that, except his circle is only Nigel. And I think this pairing was intentional on the part of somebody who was assigning rooms at the Hive. So now let's talk about Wing. So Wing doesn't do very much for the first third of this book, but then what happens is he sees Raven walking down the hallway, realizes that he may have the opportunity to talk to her about maybe what's going on with Otto, and then decides he's going to speed run book 1 and escape the Hive in like 2 paragraphs. It's amazing. I was so happy at this because all he does is he turns to Shelby, he says, "I'm leaving. Please hold my black box," gives it to her, walks after Raven, gets onto her helicopter, gets onto her shroud, and then he is gone. Which shows a couple of things. One, we're at the point where those little babies that we first met in book 1, they are nowhere near the competence of the almost adults that are the protagonists now. They may share the same names and kind of have the same personalities, but for the most part, they are night and day different. Laura is nowhere near as trusting. Otto is nowhere near as much of a jerk. Wing is able to escape the Hive all by himself. Good job. Okay. But right before this, he hears Nero and Raven talking, and Nero says, "Look, now that there's this capture or kill order out on Otto, we need to make sure that we're the first ones to find him. However, Diabolus was right about one thing, which is that Otto is actually genuinely dangerous, and if you're not able to capture him, you're gonna have to kill him." So Wing hides in the underbelly of the shroud, and Raven finds him later when she lands, and she is pissed because she doesn't want to have to explain this to Nero. And there's this amazing scene that I just have to read. So Wing says, "I'm not returning without Otto." "You'll do what you're damn well told," Raven said firmly. "Nero wants you back, and I've made it a habit never to argue with him." That is most obedient of you," Wing said with just the barest hint of sarcasm. "Don't push it," Raven said with a frown. "I can just as easily take you there unconscious in the car boot." All right. Let's jump down 2 paragraphs. Raven gets a phone call. The screen flashed, "Incoming call, Nero." She put the slim black device back in her pocket without answering. She was busy. She was on a mission. It had absolutely nothing to do with the smart-assed obedient comment that Wing had just made. At least, that was what she was going to keep telling herself. So she hangs up on Nero here, and then later her black box is destroyed. So she has no way of contacting the Hive. All because she's easily influenced by Wing's emotional manipulation that he just did. And this doesn't actually have any impact on the plot. Like, this doesn't cause some major disaster because they're not able to contact them or whatever. Everything's fine for Raven and Wing at the end of this. But what this does is it shows Raven as sort of a rebellious teenager. She may be an adult, but she appears to be younger than all of the other adults at the Hive. And she appears to be, well, we know for a fact that she's subservient to Nero, even though they're close. She always defers to his judgment and stuff. So here, when Wing sort of kind of convinces her to be a little bit rebellious, what it does is, in the minds of the audience, it pushes Raven like closer to the teenagers in like maturity and grouping. I think she's like 30, so even though she's older than the kids, like she's closer to their age group than, say, Pike, who's like 80. And then Nero is her boss. So even though they're very close to each other, Raven doesn't appear to have like an equal. She's above the kids, but she's below the rest of the teachers. But she also appears to have like a position of privilege within the school. She tells people what to do, and they listen to her because they trust her, but not because she appears to outrank them. Yeah, interesting. There is a point where Raven kills this guy who is a mook of Carlos Chavez. This guy, Raphael is built up over the course of the book as being this absolute badass who works for Carlos Chavez. He's this bloodthirsty fighter who underestimates Raven, and I think it's a little bit implied that it's partially because she's a woman, that he doesn't think that she's very much of a threat. And he dies in like one sentence. It's amazing. Come on, Cadela, Raphael spat, drawing his own twin machetes from their scabbards on his belt as Raven walked up to him. Let's dance. No, Raven said. And then she just kills him. It's so good. But Wing walks up to her and he's like, did you really have to kill that man? You know, killing people is bad. And she goes, good for you, little boy. But I like killing. No. She says, not really my style to leave people alive. So we do have a little bit of an examination here of which one of them is right. Because Ghost, as it turns out later, is Verity. Verity is the sister of Constance, whom Raven killed back in book 3. So Verity basically has been on this anger-fueled vengeance trip for the past couple of years where she got turned into a cyborg and she's the greatest fighter on the planet and her super special armor can resist Raven's super special katanas and all that stuff. And you could make the argument that if Raven had let Constance live, they wouldn't have the problem with Verity that they do now. However, I think what Raven gets out of this, and also what I get out of this, is that Raven should have just killed Verity harder in book 3 so that they wouldn't have the problem with Verity even existing in book 5. What's funny is Nero is always like, yeah, killing people is something that should be avoided. I don't even think that's funny. I think that's something that we're probably going to be talking about more later. Anyway, So Raven and Wing prepare to go back to the Hive, but first what happens is, so Raven tries to get Wing to go back to the Hive, and it says, "I can force you to go, and I will if I have to. Don't make me do that." "Do not threaten me," Wing said, sounding genuinely angry now. She had known him for long enough to realize that this was extremely unusual. He was not given to unnecessary displays of emotion. "Do you trust me?" Raven asked him. "Why?" "Answer the question," Raven said. "No," Wing said quietly. "Because I heard what Nero said to you back at the Hive. He told you that you were to kill Otto if you could not retrieve him. How can I trust you when I know that that is what you have been ordered to do?" The thing about this book is, on the whole, it is an examination of how, who Otto is in relation to everybody else. But at the core of it, this book is about the relationship between Otto and Wing. And it's very, very sweet. Wing is doing all of this because he wants his friend back. Laura's plot is she goes and helps Pike and then accidentally gets dumped in the same place that Otto is at the end. Wing is determined to retrieve his friend. And so Raven tries to give Wing the same talk that Nero did with Laura, where she's like, "Listen, we're gonna probably we're maybe going to have to kill Otto." And he is not nearly as accepting. He doesn't trust Raven as much as Laura trusts Nero. And I don't think that Wing trusts Nero either. He nods, but he doesn't really appear to agree that killing Otto is something that is ever going to be something he would consider to be acceptable. And then later on in this book, Otto actually asks him to kill him, and he goes, "Nope." So there's a stark difference here between Laura and Wing. And that is, Wing is extremely principled. We see several times that he's thinking about what his mom would want, and how his mom asked him to never take a life, and that he has been holding to this for the entire series. He's told the girls several times that he doesn't want to use guns because he considers them to be graceless thugs' weapons. He thinks martial arts is great because he can do all kinds of things that aren't killing to other people while protecting others. But he's also very inflexible. He's very rigid. He hasn't changed very much in ideology since coming to the Hive. He's progressed as a character. He's become a different person, but he hasn't conformed to what Nero wants out of the students in the same way that Laura has. And so Wing agrees to potentially go back to the Hive, but they're attacked by Ghost, and Raven tells Wing to run away, and he goes, "No," and then tries to participate in the fight with Ghost because Wing can't follow an instruction to save his life. But then he eventually does run away, and "Don't move," a voice said behind him. It was only 2 words, but Wing knew the voice almost as well as his own. Despite the instruction, he stood and slowly turned. There, standing just 10 meters away from him, was Otto. He would have walked over and given him a rib-cracking bear hug had it not been for the fact that Otto was pointing a very large handgun straight at his chest. And then Otto shoots him. It's a tranquilizer, but he does. This is heartbreaking. We've spent the last several hundred pages, hammering in just how much Wing adores Otto and just wants him back. But in the face of this technology, the Animus, it means nothing. So Cypher builds this gun for Nero. What it does is it takes the 2 halves of the yin-yang necklace that have the Overlord protocol in it, and it electrocutes Otto with the Overlord protocol. again with the lightning is capable of transmitting data thing. But anyway, the idea being that it would shunt Overlord out of the implant and into, since there's nothing else for Overlord to jump into, it would just go into nothing. Overlord would die. Now, this basically involves actually electrocuting Otto. So Cypher is like, listen, this has a 90+% chance of killing this kid, but it's the only possible solution other than just point blank shooting him in the head. So Nero's like, well, if that's all we've got. But then he finds out that the other half of the necklace, which Wing has, is missing because Wing is missing, so he kidnaps Laura, Lucy, and Shelby and takes them to where Raven and Wing are so that he can, because he's really mad at the fact that Nero lost his kid again. Cypher is a delightful character to read about. In the first book that he was in, book 2, he basically had this "the light is gone from my life" aura where, his wife died and he just didn't care anymore about anything or anybody. He didn't care about Wing. He didn't care about not killing people. He did care about Wing, but not enough to actually, be a dad. He just wanted his son to be not dead. And he was willing to kill a couple hundred people to do it. Now Cypher has been locked in the same room for the past 2.5 years since then. And he's still retained the I don't care about whether I kill people thing, but he has gained this edge of insanity where he's not actually insane. He's just kind of unfettered by social and societal norms. He is laser focused on the only thing that he wants anymore, which is protecting his son, and he's even more willing to kill anybody to get there than he was before, which is really saying something. He takes the 3 girls hostage and then gets off the Shroud and intends to blow them up. Although, because they have Shelby with them, who's able to pick the locks and stuff, they're able to escape. He also purposefully, he looks at them and goes, see this gun that I made that has the 90% chance of killing Otto? I'm not going to use it because I would rather just not take the chance and actually kill him. So I'm going to leave it on this exploding helicopter. So Laura picks it up because Laura has learned the sometimes we have to be willing to kill people we care about lesson that Wing didn't internalize. So Cypher goes in, and there are a couple of weird parallels between Laura and Cypher in this one that I honestly don't know what they mean. But Cypher kills a guard and takes his uniform and is able to infiltrate the facility that way. 5 minutes later, the girls are trying to get into the facility, and Laura says, let's kill some guards and steal their uniforms, and that's how we'll get into the facility. And the other 2 girls are like, what is wrong with you? You're nuts. Anyway, I'm sure this means something, but honestly, I don't know what it is. Cypher kills a bunch of people on his way to the brig, gets Wing out, and they have this conversation that is potentially the best conversation that any 2 people have had in the series so far. So you may remember back in book 2 that Wing murdered his father, pushed him off the side of a bridge, not bridge, but catwalk, and then didn't mourn him at all. And yet throughout this book, Wing insists that his mom told him he should never kill anybody and therefore he won't kill anybody. I really don't think that that's a retcon or anything. Wing told us several times that he considered his dad to have died when his mom did, and that the person in the Cypher suit was someone who was effectively dead. He didn't feel bad about killing his dad because he didn't think that his dad was a person. And, to be fair, his dad was trying to kill several hundred children at the time. In this conversation where Cypher goes and gets Wing out of the cell, Cypher becomes a person to Wing again, which Wing said that Cypher checked out after his mom died and like didn't talk to him at all. So they have this conversation where Wing says, "I did not mourn you." And Cypher said, "Nor would I have expected you to. I know that you have every reason to hate me, but I never wanted this life for you. Running from one battle to the next, never knowing who you can and can't trust. Your mother would have given anything to keep you away from this world of treachery and death. What right do you have to speak of what she would have wanted?" Wing asked angrily. "After everything you have done. She would have hated Cypher. I am only glad that she never saw what you have become." "As am I," Cypher said sadly. "You will never know how much I loved your mother. That is why I have to save you from this life that Nero would have you lead. You are all I have left of Sume, and I will not let you be another sacrifice on Glove's altar. That is my choice to make, not yours." Wing's intense need to not be controlled by other people probably stems largely from the fact that his dad is the dickwad. But in this conversation, they actually like communicate for what appears to be the first time since Shumei died. And because of this, Wing like acknowledges that Cypher is maybe an alive person. Which is why when he kills him at the end, he's actually sad this time. They come across Otto like 2 minutes later, and Otto tries to kill Wing, or rather the Animus Kid tries to kill Wing. But the Otto inside the Animus Kid is actually able to overpower the Animus very briefly to prevent him from being able to actually go through with it and kill Wing, because his love for Wing is just that intense. Okay, it is very sweet. It sounds cheesy when I say it like that, but it's very sweet. But Otto tells him, "I can't fight it anymore. You have to kill me. It's too strong." And Wing just goes, "No, I would sooner die, my friend. I would sooner die." So after this, they get out of this situation. Wing picks up Otto. They come across Laura and the other girls, and he gives Otto to Laura, whom he does not know has already been turned to the "maybe it's okay if we kill Otto" team. Anyway, during this time, the girls found Raven and freed her after Verity was torturing her. The whole group has met up now. They have Cypher, Raven, Shelby, Lucy, Laura, Wing, Otto, and I think that's everybody. Francisco is coming to pick them up, or has already come to pick them up, and they just need to make it out, and they'll be fine. It would be really nice to kill Trent and Verity if they can, but really the goal is leaving with their lives. But they come across Verity, and they get into a fight with her that involves Wing, and I think Shelby helps here, but at least Wing and definitely Otto helping Raven fight her off by Wing actually helping with combat and Otto using his powers to interfere with her cybernetic parts. And the thing is, why the hell did they not electromagnetically shield Ghost's cyborg limbs when they've had problems with the Animus integrating with Otto? And Otto's apparently, his personality had been coming out this entire time, but they didn't choose to shield Ghost from his interference, which was just a bizarre and dumb choice that ends up causing her to get beheaded. Darn, couldn't have happened to a nicer lady. So that's one more obstacle out of the way. They're almost back when one of the Shroods is shot out of the sky. Raven tells everybody to scatter, and the kids all have to run in completely different directions to avoid getting hit. And they're all safe, but they are conveniently separated. Based on plot relevance. Otto has used up the last of his strength, and he was doing really, really bad. Like, he was barely whispering his words, not super aware. At one point he does tell Laura something that we don't hear that I'm sure will be significant later, but isn't right now. But he was doing bad. Like, he was having to sit down and be carried by other people all the time. When the Shroud crashes, he's knocked out. So Cypher starts poking around in the wreckage, and he comes across an unconscious Otto and Laura. And he pulls out his gun and goes, "This is going to make my son hate me, and I don't know what's going to happen to our relationship. But you, little dude, are too dangerous to be left alive. I'm going to have to kill you." So he cocks a gun and is prepared to shoot Otto when Wing shoots him. And he just dies right there. And it says that Wing is more affected by this than he thought, because previously he thought he was killing a monster, and now he, for real this time, is killing his dad. But he doesn't appear to regret it, because his dad was about to kill his best friend. And as much as Cypher has been a shitty father, Otto has not been a shitty best friend. So Wing is getting ready to help Otto up when Overlord wakes up in Otto's place. And we get a fight scene that hurts. Just hurts. Because Overlord has been able to, like, control the Animus. Previously, the Animus kid was not able to do the things that Overlord controlling the Animus is able to do. His strength has increased like tenfold. The Animus is able to give him physical abilities that Otto never had. And he picks up this metal pipe and starts trying to kill Wing by hitting him with a metal pipe, which hurts specifically because not only because Otto trying to kill Wing is painful, but remember back in book 1 when we had the hilarious pipe scene where Otto and Wing are trying to defend themselves, and Otto tosses this metal pipe to Wing, but accidentally hits him in the face and knocks him out? This is like that, except way more violent. This is intent to kill. And Wing is thinking to himself, "Oh crap, this is what my dad was warning everybody about. This is why everybody was saying we have to kill Otto." But he never thinks, I guess Otto has to die. So then about 30 seconds later, Laura wakes up, realizes what's going on, and immediately says, "Wing, I need the necklace now." And I want to know what Wing thinks is going to happen here, because he doesn't know about the gun. He doesn't know that this gun was built by his dad and that it is basically intended to kill Otto or anything. He just gives her the necklace. And just reminder, the necklace is the white half of the yin-yang symbol. So it's white with a little bit of black inside, and it symbolizes a bad person, a good person has a little bit of darkness in them. And that is what Wing has been this entire series, an extremely principled person who isn't perfect. And he gives this necklace to Laura, who is one of the other people that we generally consider to be good within the series, or the closest thing to good that we have. And she uses it to do a thing that is bad, which is killing a friend of hers, or risking killing a friend of hers. The other necklace, which was the black with white in the middle, was first belonged to Nero and then was given to Cypher. So both bad men who have some softness inside, even though Nero has significantly more softness than Cypher. Anyway, Laura takes the white half of the necklace, shoves it in the gun, and shoots him, like, no hesitation. And Otto falls over and is back to being himself, but immediately, like, blacks out. And I actually misremembered this. I thought that Otto actually died and they had to resuscitate him. Not that he almost died. But previously, like 2 scenes prior, Laura had been talking to Raven, and Raven said, "Hey, why don't we use that gun thing on Otto?" And Laura said, "We can't do that because look at how weak Otto is. If we do this, he will die." So when Laura shoots him here, she basically has the understanding that he's going to die here, and it would be really neat if he doesn't, but she expects that the outcome is that he's not going to make it. But he does, and he wakes up several weeks later in the hospital. Wing is sitting by his bedside and reading him Sun Tzu, which is funny because Otto actually does say that Sun Tzu, well, The Art of War is a book that he had read when he was a kid. So Wing knows Otto well enough to know that he likes Sun Tzu. Anyway, he's thinking about the fact that he had to kill his dad and that it actually was harder this time. And it doesn't say how he feels about having a role in what happened to Otto at the end. Like I said, I really do want to know what he thought Laura was about to do with that gun. Because I don't even know if he knew that she had the gun. Did he agree with her to try to kill Otto here? I kind of think the answer is no. Like, I don't think that Wing would ever give up on him. Even when Otto is actively, like, trying to kill him with the metal pipe. Otto wakes up while Wing's reading to him and whispers something to Wing. "Am I a horse?" Wing said, looking at Otto in confusion, suddenly afraid that brain damage might have occurred. "No, I'm not a horse. Why?" "Then why the long face?" It's very sweet. I really appreciate this book because, you know, like I said last week, Otto and Wing's friendship is something that has been a pillar of the series because it's constant, because it's reliable. We know no matter what happens, these two will always be friends. But that is challenged here not by an ideological difference or an argument that they get into, but by circumstance. And what solves it is that Wing is completely unwilling to give up on getting him back. This one has a lot of parallels to book 2, where Wing was missing for half the book because of something relating to his dad, and Otto tried to go after him, but he didn't know that Wing was actually alive, so he was trying to go after and get revenge. In this one, the roles are reversed. Otto's dad is screwing with his life, so Wing is going after him on a rescue mission. It's the second book in the trilogy formula. Otto wakes up and he deliberately tells all the other kids, "Oh, you guys should tell me what I missed while I was away for the past 6 months, because all I remember is I was on Air Force One and then I woke up here. I have no idea what happened." And then he later tells Nero, "Yeah, actually, I just didn't want them to worry about me. I killed a lot of people, and I don't want them to know. I don't want them to think that I'm traumatized or anything, even though he very clearly is." So he catches Nero up on all the technological stuff, and he basically says, "Yeah, so we thought we killed Overlord, but I can almost guarantee you he's still alive. We shunted Overlord out of the implant in my head, but Overlord designed the Animus. He's probably inside the Animus. And we do see that the Animus takes over Sebastian Trent. Thank God that guy's finally dead. And then takes over Dr. Creed, and then we don't know who he's going to go after next. So Overlord is still kicking. He's just, instead of having to be implanted in somebody's head now, he's now inside a mobile venom-like blood substance that can body hop. Hooray! We also see that Diabolus decides to step down as leader of Glove. He tells Nero, yeah, I'm too soft for this. I would like to be alive for my son. Please take over my job. So Nero goes to this Glove meeting and he tells everybody, all right, Diabolus isn't coming. I'm in charge now. Let's all vote. And it just shows how much power Diabolus never really had, because nobody says, no, we're waiting for Diabolus. Because Diabolus doesn't even go to the meeting. Nero goes in and he says, I'm going to lead Glove from now on. And the vote passes by 1 vote. Now it turns out later that one of the remaining votes is actually a disciple in disguise. But the thing is, at the beginning of this series, you know, when we knew that Otto's dad was number 1, and we were wondering what was going to become of the kids when they grew up, I think a lot of us assumed that Otto would replace number 1, and that the destiny of the leader of Glove was that it was going to be Otto. But in hindsight, like, of course it's Nero. Of course it's Nero. And we see that Nero is like weirdly suited to this, which we know that he's been involved in Glove for a long time, but I just want to read this one passage. I know we gotta finish this soon. The council has decided, Nero said. If you are saying that you will not abide by that decision, we will have to decide whether you really are a suitable member of this group. Raven is on assignment at the moment, but I'm sure that when she's finished, she would not mind taking a short detour to China to discuss it with you in person. Are you threatening me? Lin Feng asked furiously. Yes, that is exactly what I'm doing. This is not some country club. This is Glove, and disloyalty will not be tolerated. This is an immediate difference from what Diabolus was doing in the last book. In the last book, Diabolus was like, oh, if you're leaving because I'm leader now, just don't start a competing organization and everything will be fine. Now Nero is like, I'm in charge now, and if you disagree with me, I'm just going to kill you. And it works, because he's right, this isn't a country club. This is a criminal organization. And the strategy that works on these grown men is the same exact strategy that Nero has been using against 13-year-olds for the past several decades, which is threatening to kill them over and over until they decide they trust him and want to follow him. I'm really, really excited to see where this goes. We get a whole lot of random parallels between random characters throughout this. You know, we've got the Laura and Wing are both opposites in their obedience to Nero and Raven, but they both are represented by the white half of the yin-yang symbol. Otto and Wing were both missing from the middle book in their trilogy because of something to do with their parent. Lucy and Otto both have OP superpowers, but make their lives miserable. The conversation between Nero and Grigori in book 3 is paralleled with the conversation between Raven and I forget his name in this one. Diabolus and Nero wear matching colors but reversed. Laura and Otto both have a scene where they have to ask everybody to stop asking them how they're feeling. Laura and Cypher both try to kill guards and take their uniforms. Overall, this is a really, really good entry. Because it centers on only things that we actually like and care about the series. It's about protecting somebody that we really, really want to see live. But throughout this book, we see that both Laura and Wing make incredibly compelling protagonists. If Otto died here, we could have had a series about them. I mean, probably not, but we could have. The series could have been over at book 6. There's a moment where Wing thinks Otto couldn't possibly be that dangerous because he saw him fighting in the last book. It's so sad. So that's where we are going into 0 hour, which I'm not going to grab because it's on the other end of the room, but I'm really excited for the next one. So I'm going to turn it over to Mitch right about here.
Good evening, it's me, Mitch, and here to talk again about HIVE. Thanks to Jade for hosting me. And we're just gonna dig right in because I waited till the last possible moment to record this, actually. Yay me. So, of course, this week we were talking about Rogue, which has the dubious honor of not being finished yet by me, but I'm sure I've read it 7 times already, so we'll just enjoy what we have. Let's see. So, what can we say about Rogue? I think the general consensus is that Rogue is good, like really good. We like Rogue. And so for a lot of us, we want to know why is it good. And aside from the things Jade has said today, I know that there have been some really excellent analyses by other fans on Tumblr, dating back years, so this has been a fascination for us all for some time, and shout out to them and respect to them because I think there's so much in this book worth talking about, but I'm gonna go my own route today, and talk about something very, very niche that makes Rogue good, in my opinion, and hopefully give some insight, not just like what makes Rogue good as reading material, but possibly like what makes Rogue art almost. And I say this because I am in particular approaching this with my degree in English literature, so like, well, English, which is as like literature, not literature from England. I've read very little of that in college, but I'm thinking about this with a much more structural attitude, which means we're narrowing our focus, but we're going to talk about something that I think is really cool. So my argument is that in Rogue we have our first and only time, really, where there are multiple protagonists, let's say, with a corresponding antagonist, like in a one-to-one relationship kind of way. Like, by comparison, for example, in book 2, where they're fighting Cypher. In book 2, when they're fighting Cypher, it's kind of like everybody's problem that he's invading the island, you know, like, even though Wing and Dr. Nero both have a very personal connection with Cypher, he's like a general problem for everyone to solve, pretty much. Whereas in this one, I think there's very specific character protagonists that correspond with very specific antagonists, and that results in some really engaging parallelism on Team Hope and Team Glove. So, we're going to talk about 8 characters in particular, and as a disclaimer before we go forward, just because I am prioritizing these 8 characters doesn't discount any other part of the story. For example, I'm not really going to talk about Laura or Lucy or Shelby very much, or even Peter Furian. There's the Russian way to say it, but I can't say it, so Peter Furian. And they're both like very plot important and, in my opinion, fan favorites, but as much value as they hold for the story, they're not important to my analysis, so we're not going to talk about them. Rest in peace. So, our 8 characters. On Team HIVE, we have Wing, Raven, Nero, and Cypher. And then on Team Hope, we have Trent, Ghost, Otto, and Dr. Creed. And more on Dr. Creed, because I know he's a little bit, like, weird when you think about that list. But specifically, I'm going to say that, like, each of these 8 characters, I think, belongs to a certain archetype. Which, if you aren't familiar with archetypes, that's, like, to put it simply, a stock character role. So, for example, like, if you want to compare 2 heroes, for example, you might pull out Cinderella or James Bond. And something that Cinderella and James Bond both have in common is that they have very politically minded stories, where Cinderella is trying to marry a prince and James Bond is working for the queen, and where things like sex and or romance are important to their stories, with Cinderella needing to get married and James Bond dropping anchor in every port, per se. But as you can tell, Cinderella and James Bond are also extremely different stories. So even though there are some very predictable things about their characters, doesn't mean that they have the exact same story. And that is interesting because our nemesis pairs, for those 8 characters, have the same archetypes, but they don't correspond nemesis to nemesis. So let me explain. So first, let's just discuss nemesis pairs. And when I describe them as nemesis pairs, I don't mean that they have, like, a one-on-one fight in the story, you know? And, like, I think that's kind of what we expect, partially, like, when I think of, like, superhero movies, like, there's, like, one bad guy, and Iron Man is gonna fight that one bad guy. Batman is gonna fight the Joker, because that's what it is to be a nemesis. But really, it's not necessary that they, like, have a one-to-one fight for them to be structurally similar in the pattern that I'm using. So, first 2 are Nero and Trent. Both of these characters are kind of the heads of their respective organizations. They tend to have a paternal relationship-ish with some of the other characters, particularly Raven and Ghost, respectively, who we'll talk about in a moment. They both have beef with one another from book 3, when Trent literally kidnapped Nero. And they are also, like, pretty important in terms of strategic planning when it comes to the battles in question. Like, it's Nero and Trent who have the ultimate authority in any given situation. Not any of, like, everyone reports to them. So I have titled their shared role in the story as coordinators. And so something I think they have in common is that they both have a desire for safety and strength, which is to say that, like, Dr. Nero wants to protect the school, he wants to protect his students, and he also wants to maintain the integrity of what GLOVE stands for and the livelihood of the institution itself. And similarly, Sebastian wants similar things for Hope. He wants Hope to continue flourishing, and he's a little less big on safety, but then again, he has a secret lair, so they want to be able to continue the work that they're doing safely and together. And so likewise, their greatest fear is exposure. It would be devastating to Trent to find out, for the governments of the world to find out that he's, like, secretly a bad guy. And similarly, Nero does not want the location of HIVE found. So these are 2 characters where they both have a similar role, but also they have the same archetype in their story. Let's see. Next, in Nemesis pairs, we have Raven and Ghost, who are both female assassins. They both have a big grudge against the world, sometimes it seems like, and I don't know. The fact that Ghost was made specifically to be able to defeat Raven kind of links them together immutably, where they were designed for one another almost. But they don't have the same archetypal pair, and in fact none of the others do, so I will skip to those to the end. Our next nemesis pair is going to be Wing and Otto, and this like kind of sounds odd because of course Otto is our protagonist and he is the character we're rooting for the most, but since he's infected with animus, he is not he's not quite himself, and so therefore he and Wing both are kind of like the junior partners of the whole show. Like, Wing is tagging along with Raven, Otto is being trained by Ghost, and they're kind of like they're like the lowest ranking people in their organizations, and Wing and Otto are like, I don't even know what to call them. I think, like, they're best friends. I think that's the issue, is like, we know they're best friends, but they're on opposite sides of a conflict due to the animus. And so Otto, like, wants to kill everyone, and Wing wants to save Otto, and that puts them in direct conflict with one another, because those goals don't really work. And so that's kind of what puts them in the same position and against one another in the story. And then finally, we have Cypher and Dr. Creed. I put these two together because they're both very educated men in their fields. They both work with computers a lot. Cypher, we know, is like more of an artificial intelligence kind of guy, whereas Dr. Creed is like trying to figure out what animus is, even though he's never like worked with it before. And they're both just kind of discovering what is up with the technology at their disposal at the moment. And so I know that Dr. Creed kind of seems like an odd choice to include with these, because like Otto and Wing and Raven are like front and center so much in the series all the time, whereas Dr. Creed is in like 4 chapters, I don't know. But even though he's a minor character, he does structurally have the same function that Cypher does. Or, well, that's not true. He has the same function as Raven, actually, but I'll talk about that in a moment. But the fact that in the last scene he's overtaken by Overlord kind of elevates his character a little bit and makes him more important than we realize. So with that being said, it's kind of important that he's a minor character and under-respected, and I will talk about that in just a moment. Let's see. So, we have Raven, Wing, and Cypher, and Otto, Ghost, and Creed. And as characters, they're in conflict with one another. Not just Team Hope versus Team Glove, but also because they have goals that conflict with one another. However, what I'm saying here is that Raven's goals don't necessarily match up completely to Ghost's goals, and Wing's goals don't necessarily match up to Otto's. So they're actually a little bit switched around. So the first big comparison that can be made between the two is Ghost and Wing, actually. And I characterize them as siblings archetypally because their main goal is to save their sibling. For Wing, he is intent on literally saving Otto from the animus. He wants to help Otto. He wants to like fix everything for him. And that is like the main relationship that is keeping stuff together here. And Ghost wants revenge for her sister, who died in the last book. and I never remember if it's Constance or Verity, but it's one of them, obviously. And so, like, clearly, like, in avenging her sister, Ghost cannot, like, bring her sister back from the dead, but in the somewhat twisted logic of revenge, it would save her sister for her killer to have gone punished. And so similarly, like, the major fear for these characters is that the people they love will be lost. The worst thing that could have happened to Wing at the end of this is that he would have not saved Otto, and Otto either would have actually died or been completely consumed by Overlord, and Otto Malpence, as we knew him, would cease to exist. Both of those are bad options. And so that is what kind of gives both Ghost and Wing their oomph in the story. Next, I compare Raven with Dr. Creed, interestingly enough, and I describe them both as detectives because I believe in the story they both have this important role to discover the truth. It's Raven's job to find out where Otto is and if they can protect him, and if they can't, then it's her job to kill him. And similarly with Dr. Creed, it's his job to figure out if Otto is functioning properly, if everything is in tune for the story. And so for both of them, the worst thing that could happen, their big fear, is that they'll lose control or access to the truth as they move forward in the story. So it would be the worst thing if Raven just, like, never found Otto. Not necessarily, it wouldn't necessarily be bad if they found Otto and he was Overlord, or if they found Otto and he was dead, or if they found Otto and he was actually just fine. Because in all of those, there's certainty. The problem is if they didn't find Otto and didn't know what happened to him, because then they never know if they're safe or not. So that's kind of why they need to find him, to find certainty. And so similarly with Dr. Creed, he needs to have complete control and access over Otto. In this case, more literally, because Otto can be programmed like a computer. And if he were to lose control of Otto, then the whole project is lost. And finally, I have Otto and Cypher as my last pair, and they are both dissenters, which means to say they are dissatisfied with their place on Team Glove or Team Hope, which is to say that Cypher does not want to be in Glove and Otto doesn't want to be in Hope, and that's currently not happening for them. So their main desire is to escape, and their main fear is actually, I think in some ways, their own strength. And to give shape to that idea, Cypher's big fear arrives when he finds out that Overlord has most likely been growing in Otto's head for the last 2 years. And he realizes that this thing he created, Overlord, is so powerful that the entire world could end. And similarly with Otto, the fact that he is carrying both the Animus and Overlord makes him incredibly risky as an individual. And so they want freedom, so they do want freedom not just from the organizations they belong to, but also from Overlord, essentially. And that is what gives them their oomph. And so it's interesting then, because when we get to the end of the book, we can kind of examine how each of these characters deals with the potential desires and fears that they each have. And we find out that, like, all is not as it seems, really. For example, like, in terms of the dissenters, Otto does get free of Hope, and Cypher doesn't get free of Glove, because he's, like, the bad guy, and Otto's the good guy. Similarly, like, Raven wins, and Dr. Creed doesn't. Wing wins, but Ghost doesn't, and Nero wins, but Sebastian Trent doesn't. And so, even though each of these, like, characters has a shared, like, archetype and their nemesis, like, the fact that it's not one-to-one in their motivations allows for certain characters to defeat the others. For example, I mean, Nero and Trent, they're one-to-one, but, like, Wing as a sibling beats Otto as a dissenter, but their goals kind of combine, so it works out. Raven as a detective beats Ghost as a sibling. That's what I meant. And Overlord kind of wins through Dr. Trent as a detective, which is all very interesting, actually. So that tension is, like, what I want to hit on, sort of to wrap up with this character analysis, because, again, those tensions don't perfectly align. Raven wants to save Glove, and Ghost wants revenge, and Wing wants to save Otto, and Otto kind of wants to save everyone from himself. Nero wants to protect the school, Trent wants to end Glove, and Cypher wants to get his life back, and Overlord, ultimately, / Dr. Creed, wants to possess everyone's lives for his own. And so, ultimately, I think, like, the conflicts that occur are super enriched by the differences that happen. And yes, like, those tensions are interesting, but what's more interesting is that, like, if you think about it, nobody really wins in the end, which I think, for me, makes this one of the most artistic books in HIVE, because the use of irony is so subtle and yet so perfect that the entire story kind of just sparkles a little bit more, I think. And so I think, like, what happens with Wing and Otto is a really good example to start with, because if we look at the two sibling characters, Ghost and Wing, I said before that Ghost's goal as a sibling was to save the person she loves, which is her dead sister. But of course that's ridiculous, because her sister's dead. And so she fails because her task was impossible. Like, even if she got revenge by killing Raven, she wouldn't have brought her sister back. And Raven, who is a detective whose goal is truth and the pursuit of truth, kind of is, like, the reality of death coming back to remind Ghost that, no, your sister can't be saved. She's gone. And in short order, so is she. So love kind of, or if you want to call it love, if you want revenge to be a form of love, love falls prey to truth in very short order. But the same is not entirely true for Wing and Otto, because Wing has his love for Otto as his brother, and that love is what drives him to kill his own father, and also to throw away the memento of his mother, the necklace, which is the last thing he has of hers. And so he has to, like, give those things to Otto to actually save him, and yet he does actually have to let Laura kill Otto a little bit in order for him to be fully saved. And so if Wing's biggest fear is losing the people he loves, he has to lose Cypher and his mom and Otto in the pursuit of getting Otto back, which he does. But it's a close call, kind of. But It's also interesting then to compare Cypher and Otto, because Cypher wants escape, and he can't really necessarily because of Wing. Like, at the end he does decide to leave Wing behind, but his decision to kill Otto is what drives Wing to kill him, and so then Cypher is ultimately destroyed by Glove. He's like, it's like a triple knockdown from Nero and Overlord and now Wing, that Cypher really can't escape Glove being in control of everything. Otto, on the other hand, as a dissenter, is glad to be free of hope, and he's able to, like, go home, but the bitter irony of his recovery is that in saving Otto and in shooting the pulse gun at him, Laura transfers Overlord's consciousness from Otto's little brain computer into the Animus itself, which, as we can see from the epilogue, has some serious unintended consequences. So, yes, they escape, but, I mean, I guess Cypher escapes through death, but, which isn't really escape. So Cypher just doesn't escape, but Otto escapes, but also not really, because the evil he's trying to escape still exists. And that's not so good. And then that also plays in a lot with Raven and Dr. Creed, because both of these characters are detectives meant to find out the truth, but in the end, neither of them realize that Overlord is still alive. And so the truth that really matters, which is that there is a malevolent, evil, artificial intelligence hell-bent on killing everyone on the planet, being alive is, like, not on their radar, and it is what takes Dr. Creed, ultimately. And finally, with Trent and Nero, we have Trent, I mean, if he was looking for safety and security, and then he lost both hope and his life, so that's kind of cut and dry. But Nero is a little bit more complicated, because he does save his school, and he does get all of his students back, and it's good, and that's fine. But the cost of this entire story is Diabolus Darkdoom realizing that he doesn't want to be the head of Glove anymore. He's not well suited to this job. He is not happy doing this job, and he doesn't like doing a job that could take him away from his son, who he's already been away from for so long. And so if Nero's biggest fear is exposure, as a coordinator, that is the main thing he gains at the end of the story, when he realizes that he has to become the new head of Glove, because as the head of Glove, he is completely exposed to criticism, to awareness, to skepticism, and to, what do you want to call it, like, dissatisfaction, hatred, bad reviews from his coworkers. They don't like him. And so they have a temporary safety, I think, is what we can say at the end. Our protagonists, the people we care about, have a temporary safety, where Nero's in the school, and Raven brought everyone home, and Otto's recovering, and Wing will heal from the fact that he had to do this terrible thing to save his friend. But we know, in a turn of dramatic irony, that none of this is secure, none of this is safe, and none of this can last. And that, I think, the fact that, like, we have these strong characters coming together for such a kind and good purpose to save Otto, and they succeed, and Otto is saved, only for us to read the ending there, is, like, beautiful, because yes, Otto is saved, but make no mistake, this is not a happy ending, and that tension and that drama is really the most exciting and savory part of the story for me. So I'll end it there. Thanks again to Jade for letting me talk for so long, and I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.
It's me again. A couple of days have passed. Both Mitch and I have gotten a little bit tied up, so this one's coming out a little bit later than usual. But we are re-recording this section a little bit because we have something very exciting happened. Somebody finally answered the discussion question. So the discussion question last week was, what is an example of a sequel series and why does it work or not work? And Amy C, hi Amy C, answered the question with the Hunger Games. And she brought up the point that, and I think a lot of people, especially people who were reading Hunger Games when it first came out in our age group, had a similar reaction. She pointed out that the Hunger Games Book 1 is all about, the actual Hunger Games and kids fighting each other and this very structured idea of the games and a lot of different very clear things that you have to weigh in your mind as you're reading the book. And then from then on, the series changes significantly and largely away from that, to the point that the third book effectively has no Hunger Games. They reference an event that they call the 76th Hunger Games, but it's really not. And so for especially the people who were younger, I think, or not particularly interested in the elements of the story that took over the story more towards the end, and I definitely empathize with this because I was one of those people. I didn't want to read about a love triangle. I wanted to read about kids killing each other. The second and third books sort of got away from what made us interested in the series in the first place. So, yeah, really good point. I asked my dad, and he brought up a positive example in the Aliens series. So the first Aliens movie is a very atmospheric horror film that is followed up by several more films in the same universe that are tonally coherent with each other, but really largely not tonally coherent with the original Alien film. They make sense, and independently they are all very good movies, but they don't really match up with the first movie as well as they match up with each other. However, the second, third, and fourth Alien movies are generally considered to be very good pieces of media and definitely worth watching. And then my answer is something a little similar to HIVE, Westworld. Westworld is a series that was adapted based on a movie, and the first season tells a complete story that is very good and follows the stories of a set of characters that is outlined from the beginning and ties all of their stories up in a neat little bow at the end. And in the following seasons, after season 1, the story feels very much like it could have ended after season 1 and the rest of it was unnecessary. And I've always been a proponent of long stories. I always say unnecessary doesn't really mean anything in storytelling, because if you want to save time, if you don't want to watch unnecessary things, go do your taxes, don't watch TV. But seasons 2 and 3 of Westworld very truly feel like the writers didn't anticipate that they would exist in the first 2 seasons. Well, while they were writing the first season. So that's my answer. As for the discussion question this week, the point of Rogue is that Otto is turned against the people who care about him and whom he cares about, and this is executed to a degree that is really impactful and memorable, and ended up causing this installment to be the most popular in the series. So my question is, what is another example of protagonists or people that are generally fighting on the same team having to face up against each other in media? Either by someone having to turn evil temporarily, or two characters disagreeing in an arc, such as in Captain America's Civil War. So that's my question. That's also my cat outside the door making that noise. So that's it for this week. Next week we will be reading 0 Hour, also known as the one where they go back to America. I wanted to be able to say the one where they go here, the one where they go here each book, but unfortunately Dreadnought and 0 Hour had the gall to take place in the same location. So, yeah. See you next one.